All right, here we go. Data analysis notes. This is on page SS16. How do you analyze data? So make sure that you write your essential question on the top of the page. We are going to work on, you want to, again, open your notebook. Whoops, I need to start my video. You need to open your notebook. Open it like this so you can have access to SS15 as well, because we're going to refer to SS15 as we go through SS16. All right. So the first thing that we need to know is how do we just read a graph? Okay. And you might be familiar with this, but we talked about the independent and the dependent variable. And how do we look at the graph and know which one is which? So there's a couple of acronyms that we like to use. It's called dry and then mix, right? So the dependent variable, what we measure, goes on the y-axis. The mix, meaning the independent variable manipulated, or the independent variable, goes on the x-axis, right? So what you change. So usually, like if it's time, or the concentration of sugar, you do the concentration of sugar and then the plant height. We go ahead and we'll put the plant height on the y-axis, and then the concentration of, let's say, sugar on the x-axis, right? So dry mix, and I always say that just as a reminder, if I'm talking, or lecturing, and I need to think about, okay, what goes on the x-axis? I just say dry mix, and it's always the independent variable goes on the x-axis. All right, so when we're going to look at these, when you look at a graph, we're going to try to have you go through this process of, the sequential process of how we're looking at a graph, right? So it doesn't really make a word. So the first thing you want to do is identify. The second thing you want to do is find a trend. Third thing you want to do is make observations. Remember, we're going to talk about qualitative versus quantitative. Then you're going to make an inference. What's going on? What do you think is going on? Evaluate the graph and then summarize the graph. All right. So let's go ahead, and we don't normally give you the what I'm going to make about the so what I'm going to do is I want you to try to determine what these are, and then later we're going to go through it, and we'll double check to make sure that we have the same answers. So looking at the graph on page SS15, identify the title. All right, and that's pretty easy, I hope. All right. The second thing you're going to identify is what is the independent variable with units. All right. What is the independent variable with units? And then what is the dependent variable with units? All right. So those are the first three things that you want to identify. All right. The next, we're going to try to identify the trend. So what we want in the statement, it's almost like a hypothesis, but it is actual factual. So as the independent variable, increases, decreases, what happens to the dependent variable? Does that increase, decrease? Does it go up and then go down? Does it, go up rapidly and then stop? So as specific as you can. What this does is it gives us a relationship between the two variables, right? So that is our trend. The third thing we want to do is we want to make an observation, and this is a little bit off, right? So remember, we want to include both qualitative and quantitative. So the qualitative can almost be like your trend, so if you're looking on SS615, what is happening, and then qualitative. So just a general description of what is going on, but quantitative, we want to get specific numbers, right? At the depth of this, how many bubbles do we have, right? So we want numbers. All right, so look at that on page SS15. Inference. What can you infer from this graph, right? So what's your hypothesis on what will happen to the dependent variable if it keeps on increasing? All right, so what do you think is going to happen if we keep on getting deeper, right? And then extrapolate, meaning going to the, if I was going to go to 40 meters, what would be the exact, what would you think is going to be the exact number of bubbles that this plant is producing? Okay, so that's what we want to do when we mean extrapolate. If we were going to go out to 40 meters, where would that bubble line go to? That's our extrapolation. The next thing we want to do is evaluate. Is there enough information? Is there information that is not assessed by the graph that would allow for a better understanding of the topic? One of the most common answers I get is that if we had more data points, that is not a good evaluation statement, because more data points, you might, fill in some blanks, but it's not going to help us understand that topic any better, right? There is always think about it as there is enough information on that graph to get a basic understanding, but what other things could help you understand this topic a little bit better? All right, and then lastly, we want to give a one-sentence summary based on the content that you learned. All right, so just a one sentence, it's not like a summary of the notes, but it's going to be a one-sentence summary of what you learned based on that graph. All right, so and then lastly, when we are done, you are going to, annotate your SS16, highlight, circle key terms and the main ideas, and then again, generate two test questions on the left side. I'm going to leave you with the summary of that one sentence of that what, so you don't have to write another summary. So that's going to be it for today. And again, we will go over the answers. We'll sort of, we'll go through and see what everybody got. But I just wanted to make sure that we don't give you the answers right away, so you actually can think about how we analyze a graph.